John Skipper is the former boss at ESPN. I guess you'd call him the CEO of ESPN. Finished up at ESPN in 2018. He's been doing some other stuff, and he recently did an interview with Dan Le Batard that the whole thing was interesting, but there were 2 or 3 things in there that I felt like were pretty telling and impactful in the discussion of why conference expansion is going on right now. But more importantly, what could be behind it and some of the details on TV. I'll tell you what that is. Here's one of the comments. I'll have 3 clips for you, but here's one of the things he said. He started off talking about, Kansas and why it isn't He started off talking about Kansas and why it isn't entirely crazy to think that they might fit in the ACC. It has to do with distributor fees. Here's what he said.
The ACC will be fine. Oddly enough, they wouldn't be a bad home for Kansas, though geographically it's crazy. Though it does bring in another state for the conference network, and that has to be kept in mind.
Why does that matter? Because people point out with Oklahoma that that's a big deal.
Because if you add a college from a state you're already in, you don't get any more distributor fees, right? They add Texas. They've already got Texas A&M. There's no new money from the state of Texas. They add Oklahoma, they now have to pay a distribution fee in Oklahoma. If the ACC added Kansas, you'd have to add Kansas. And by the way, even with fairly small populations, it's still a lot of money for those networks, which all are above $1. So it's $1 for every good citizen of the state who has a pay TV sub, which is declining, but still a lot of people.
So you have to ask, what are distributor fees and how big of a deal is that in this whole thing? Well, it's a pretty significant piece of the puzzle is the way it sounds to me. It's not the whole entire reason that you would bring a team in or whatever, or expand, but it's a big part of the reason because it does add up to a lot of money still in 2021. Here's a little bit about what distributor fees are. And you take like the SEC network, for instance, for say Dish or DirecTV or Comcast to distribute that and charge for it in a new state, or not a new state, but in a particular state, they have to turn around and pay ESPN or the SEC network to be able to distribute it in that state. So when you look at the SEC network, which is the revenue for it is tied directly back to the conference, to the SEC. When they move into a new state that's not already on their footprint, like Oklahoma, then they benefit because then there's this influx of distributor fees because those channels, to stay in business, Comcast, cable, the satellite channels, are going to want to distribute that to people in that state. So to do so, they have to pay you to be able to distribute it, and it does add up to a lot of money.
Though it does bring in another state for the conference network, and that has to be kept in mind.
Why does that matter?
If you add a college from a state you're already in, you don't get any more distributor fees.
So when you look at the footprint map for the SEC, as it currently stands, what Skipper was saying is they've got Texas A&M. They're already in the state of Texas. So distributor fees for the SEC network, for instance, are already coming back to the conference from Texas. So adding the University of Texas doesn't change that.
They add Texas. They've already got Texas A&M. There's no new money from the state of Texas. They add Oklahoma, they now have to pay a distribution fee in Oklahoma.
But it does change when they add the state of Oklahoma, which they didn't previously have.
Even with fairly small populations, it's still a lot of money.
There is a pretty steady decline, not drastic, but a pretty steady decline of pay subs, as he said, so paying to subscribe to cable or satellite.
Still a lot of money for those networks, which all are above $1. So it's $1 for every good citizen of the state who has a pay TV sub, which is declining, but still a lot of people.
And the predictions are that by 2025, it'll be all the way down there around 60 million total across the whole country. So you ask the question, is this totally a money grab on the part of the Southeastern Conference? Well, maybe not entirely. My own opinion is that there's a little bit of kind of positioning yourself for the future of college athletics. We all know it's changing. Maybe going to power conferences, maybe going to your own governance and autonomy, and that's probably down the road at some point. and this is the SEC sort of being first, but it's not like they went out and were knocking on the door of Oklahoma and Texas. Oklahoma and Texas came to them. There's an opportunity. They're just taking advantage of the opportunity. So I don't think it's strictly a money grab on the SEC's part. Because we are in a time right now with declining cable satellite subscriptions across the country, but increasing digital subscriptions, ESPN Plus, Disney Plus, those kinds of things, Hulu, Amazon, all that stuff coming on Peacock. What they're doing is, in the short term, it strengthens their position with the paying subscribers to cable and satellite in the short term. But long term, it also sets them up to be in a strong position when the digital and streaming services start to actually take over. And a third thing I think that is why the SEC would do this, it's more money and power as college athletics moves into the name, image, and likeness area.
And the ACC, on the other hand, has to worry not to give away the 15th and 16th spot in case Notre Dame became available.
So when you go back to what Skipper said about Kansas and the ACC.
So the ACC will be fine. Oddly enough, they wouldn't be a bad home for Kansas, though geographically it's crazy, though it does bring in another state for the conference network, and that has to be kept in mind.
There are already reports about Kansas, talking to the Big Ten, and I'm sure from a distributor fees standpoint, I'm sure the Big Ten would love to add the state of Kansas. When you look at Oklahoma for the SEC, it's not a hugely populated state. It has a few more people than, say, Arkansas and Mississippi, which right now are the two least populated states in the SEC footprint. A few more than Arkansas. They've got about 1 million more people than the state of Mississippi. So if you look at the current SEC footprint map and the fact that going west, they would add the state of Oklahoma. If you look to the east, there's a couple of states right there in that little gap in the SEC footprint in the southeast that are largely populated states. North Carolina and Virginia. North Carolina is the 9th most populated state in the entire country. It has like double the number of people of several of the bigger SEC states like Alabama and others. And Virginia is way like the 12th or 11th or 12th most populated state in the country as well. So when you start to talk about streaming numbers and distributor fees going forward, I'm not saying that they are, but if they were not only going west, but to fill that map to the east, the states of North Carolina and Virginia are prime real estate for SEC expansion, and you need to remember that. Is it NC State and you let North Carolina and Duke do their own thing? Is it Virginia Tech? Do they leave Virginia? Do they not? I don't know those answers. Now, one key thing is I've been told, particularly like Clemson and Florida State, and that was the discussion we were having, where somebody who knows told me, well, their grant of rights is tied up until 2035. If that's the case for the other ACC schools, that is definitely something to consider, that this may take a long time to fill that map out. Now, I thought you might find this interesting. Here's another comment from that interview with John Skipper regarding teams that are already in big leagues like the SEC. Check this out.
The schools can't kick anybody out, right? Now, that would be the ultimate sort of difficulty, which is, I'm not even going to say names.
But what is legitimately to keep the SEC from saying, you know what, get out of here, Vanderbilt, we want Ohio State?
I think there may be some governance things. I'm not sure they could do it without everybody agreeing, the schools agreeing. It's an interesting phenomenon, which I don't think has ever happened.
It's never been done. Founding members are not supposed to get kicked out, so it's never been done. And I think more importantly, as long as certain people are in charge, the Sankeys, the Scott Stricklands, the Greg Burns, the John Cohens, Mark Keenums, as long as those kinds of people are in charge of the SEC, some of the smaller schools, smaller budgeted schools, different schools are fine. What if you look up in 10 or 15 years, and let's say as things have gotten comfortable and changed, now a Texas Longhorn person is in charge of the SEC, or Oklahoma, then that might be a different story then. Listen to this comment about the overall effect of this expansion and these things that are changing in college sports, name, image, and likeness, and other stuff, and what it means for the college sports landscape.
Well, it just means that the bigger schools are going to get bigger. It's going to be harder to intrude into the club somebody yesterday said on the air, there's 15 to 20 schools that overwhelmingly dominate college football. It's not even that many, right? If you look at the 4 who get into the playoffs, it's Clemson, it's Alabama, it's
And
LSU.
Notre Dame, yeah.
Ohio State.
Notre Dame has to be taken to the slaughter. I know we've got a fan here.
Now, maybe that's just an opinion, but if it is just an opinion of a guy, it's a guy who has a lot of experience at the very top of these discussions as they've popped up over the years. So take that for what it's worth. He thinks what it means is the bigger are just going to keep getting bigger and make it even harder to kick the door down and get into their club. Hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what you think. Uncertain future? It's going to be interesting. I know that either way. Thanks for watching.